Welcome to the Arcfluence podcast, where we talk about how design impacts the way we live, work, and invest. I'm Nick Caracan, your host, and today I have two co-hosts, but one is not Nino. Today we have Danny Porter joining us, and as usual, and as always, Paul Fatkins.
Yep, we have a fill-in today.
Yeah, we do. And this is what episode is this, Danny?
This is episode 13.
Lucky number 13, and we are talking about attic conversions and basements.
Two places that are scary.
Yeah, especially for me. I mean, have you seen this? Listen, okay, Danny, I got to get this spider video. It's my favorite.
Yeah, we'll send you that one, Danny. You can post that one up.
I love listening and watching that over and over again just to watch myself in agony.
Yeah, and I'm typically behind the scenes editing the podcasts, and so today I'm here.
But to be fair, are you a homeowner or not?
I am. Yeah, a new home. And 2019, we got our first home.
And Danny, do you have a basement?
We do have a basement, and it was unfinished when we moved into this.
So you're fine.
Ryan home.
Don't worry about it.
And now
it's a finished basement.
It's a finished basement. Yeah. And who helped you do some of those things?
My old man and I, we spent every weekend down there.
I'm
not going to leave out. I'm not going to leave out.
Wow, he's sitting right there.
Wow, we took every weekend.
You know, I was mad at Nino for not showing up before, but never mind. I'm mad at both of you.
When it came time to do the drywall, Nick came with all of his tools because he spent many years doing drywall. But that was fun. You had what was that lift called that you?
Yeah, the drywall lift.
The drywall lift. Yeah.
You know, my drywall video now has 1.2 million views.
That's wild. And so you remember Uncle Kenny and Kenny were just Googling how to do like a specific kind of
found
drywall.
My video.
And you came up and they're like, oh my God, it's Nick. It's like the best story.
He pops up on my feed all the time.
Really?
For whatever reason. Yeah. Oh. Probably because I've searched whatever. It knows what you're looking at. So.
It knows what you're thinking, Paul.
I guess. Yeah.
All right.
Thinking about drywall.
Danny, let's put that drywall video up too.
Yeah. Well, we should talk about that drywall video.
All right, so we're going to talk about attic conversions and basements and why are we doing that? We're doing that for a couple different reasons. One, there's a lot of code that's being enforced now that wasn't necessarily been enforced over the last decade all over the country, specifically here in Columbus, but also with the interest rates not coming down quite as much as we were hoping, a lot of people are having second thoughts on moving. Like, I'm locked into this 3% interest rate on my home. Rather than sell this, buy a new house, I'm going to go ahead and do a remodel or an addition or add some square footage to my house so my house is now the way I want it to be.
Especially if you're locked in at 2%, 3%,
why not?
Right? Yeah. Why would you go and, unless you really needed to. So it's like, do a little bit of improvement, get more use out of the space that's there.
Now, there are a couple things to think about when you're doing this too. Like a true addition on a main floor, on a main level, first, second, whatever, is going to be certainly more valuable than basement square footage or attic square footage. If you do the attic square footage, just make sure that we're adding all the right things that are going to bring in natural light, etc. And we're going to go through this list and talk about all the things that you need to potentially look out for when doing these renovations so that you can consider those costs. So going back to Danny, you finished your basement, but you did a lot of work yourself.
We did. I learned a ton. I had never put up drywall, but I mean, Dad's been doing this for many years, and you have so much experience and constantly like picking your brain and going back and forth. But again, we just chipped away at it. It was every weekend we would spend 6 hours. We would be putting it together, and it became a playroom for the kids. It was the whole idea behind it was we wanted a really good, clean, finished, air-conditioned space in the summer for the kids to play, and that's been great.
You didn't even add a bathroom or a bedroom, and I still think you probably added $15,000 to $20,000 of value to your home just by finishing that space, which, listen, a simple renovation like that probably cost you, a few grand?
Yeah, it wasn't a lot. I mean, and it was back, I think, during really COVID era, so we were down there, but you mentioned the interest rates. We locked in so low in our house, and so we've had that mindset. We went into the house thinking it's a starter home. We want to be in something a little different down the line, but we've kind of changed our thinking where we're like, let's build the fence, let's remodel the kitchen.
You're dropping $20,000 on a fence because you're staying now.
Yeah.
This is home. All right, fair enough. I think if we're having a conversation with our clients on a design consultation and they're kind of on the fence about doing a basement renovation or doing an attic conversion, I always lean towards the attic conversion unless we have like 9-foot ceilings in the basement and we're planning to do some type of egress window.
Now, that's when you can walk out into the backyard, right?
Yeah.
No.
Maybe climb out.
No, climb out.
We're-
Okay.
Yeah, we're talking climbing out. So basement for me, you're fully underground basically. So yeah, if it's and technically, Nick, you don't necessarily always need egress. It depends on what the use is down there. If it's like a sleeping area or what they consider habitable space, if it falls into that category, you have to then provide that extra egress.
Actually,
So
I mean, only if it's a bedroom, really. Yeah. I'm pretty sure if it's a bedroom, you can count it as habitable space. If it's a game room, living area, they'll count the square footage. But usually the square footage that we've seen on comps is about half of whatever your main square footage is going for. So if we're getting $300 a square foot on the main floor, you're probably only getting $150 for finished basement square foot.
Yeah. In general, I think it's a little bit more easier to finish the attic versus the basement. So, and less to worry about too. I mean, you're worried about water and other things possibly getting in, and
I guess it depends on your roof line, right? Because
I mean, there's a lot of things that factor into it.
We've had a couple clients that had to pop the top, and what that means is we have to take off the entire roof structure and extend the walls.
If that's the case, then I would say go to the basement.
Right.
But again, if you're in the situation where you have to raise the roof line, your basement is probably not even, your basement ceilings are probably 5 foot something or 6 foot something.
And that's why we have that conversation. Danny, how your house was built in what, the 90s?
Yeah,
2000?
it was like a late 90s Ryan home.
Yeah. So you're...
No, I'm sorry. No, it was built in... it's only about 10 years old. So it was built... No, I'm sorry. My brain mixes up the decades now.
You are the first person in there, right?
No, we're not.
You're not.
We're the second family in there. So I think the house was built in 2010.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right. So the basement's relatively tall already. So what are your ceiling heights there?
I would say probably a couple feet above my head. So maybe 8 feet.
Yeah. I was going to say a little taller, but maybe you're right with the 8 foot. I know, like, for example, Paul said 5 foot, 6 foot, 7 foot ceilings. We do have some requirements in basements, and one is a ceiling height, and you have to have a minimum of 7 feet in your basement for it to be habitable space. So if it's, go ahead, Paul.
With an exception, if it's an existing basement, then you're permitted to go to 6 foot 8 inches.
Okay, so you get an extra 4 inches if it's existing basement.
And then if you have any obstructions, you can go down to 6 foot 4 inches.
Now, for everyone who's listening, all 7 of you, that is not a very good ceiling height. You probably don't want to finish. If you're putting a lot of money into a basement that's 6 foot 4 inches tall.
Well, only for, so if you have a beam or you have like some ductwork.
So the obstruction.
Only at that point can you go down to 6'4". Otherwise, existing basement 6'8" everywhere. And if it's a new basement, the minimum is 7. Like
that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds extremely...
And even 7 is low by
cramped.
typical standards. Yeah.
No, if we're, so some of our, a lot of our clients who are not doing their investment properties, who are doing their forever homes, we'll have the conversation like, hey, we'll invest into like underpinning the walls. And what that means is we're bringing in an engineer, we're demoing the floor. We're digging down to 9 feet, sometimes 10 feet. I mean, if you're gonna invest tens of thousands of dollars into excavating your basement, make it worth your while. So sometimes we go down to 10 feet. And now you have this incredible space. It's not cheap. It's really expensive. And in a lot of cases, it's less money to take your entire roof off and rebuild up a story.
Yeah. Or do an addition or something like that is again more cost effective.
Yeah, just the excavating portion alone and underpinning and temporary supports can cost like $50,000-$60,000 in some cases.
Can I ask a question? So we're thinking about so we actually only finished half our basement, but my wife works from home, so we've thought about taking that whole other second half, putting in a bathroom that's kind of adjacent to the playroom, and then a quiet office that Cindy can use like full time. Like, what do we need to think about even getting into something like that? Or we just start putting up drywall?
Since you have a newer home, I mean, you got to run your drain lines for the bathroom, so you're gonna have to cut some concrete and tie into your main
Yeah, and if your main line's all the way on the other side, then you're ripping up pretty much your entire floor all the way across.
Yeah,
because you're gonna have to connect back to wherever that main line is.
But if I recall, it's in the it's centrally located,
Yep.
so I think you're okay. In your particular case, since I'm familiar with your basement, because I did work in your basement, Danny, I think you're not
He's
run
never
into.
gonna let you forget that.
No, you won't. Yeah.
You're not gonna run into too many
I was
problems.
getting there.
So I feel like newer homes have less obstacles than older homes.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
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 I think the newer homes are kind of built with that in mind, that somebody might finish the basement later. Like I know certainly if I wanted to finish my basement here, like it wouldn't be an issue, right? In terms of ceiling height, stuff like that. But if we get an investment property where somebody buys that was built in 1910, yeah, I mean the basement's guaranteed 100%. It's going to be a struggle to do anything down there.
If I'm downtown, unless I'm doing some underpinning and doing some seriously tall ceilings like 9-10 feet, which is a huge investment, by the way, and a lot of times maybe that's the right way to go, because based on the footprint and the restrictions and the setbacks and the things that are going on with that particular property and zoning, maybe we don't have an option. Maybe that's it.
Yeah.
But I try to stay away and out of basements and use them strictly for mechanicals and storage.
What's underpinning?
Underpinning is so right now your walls sit on footers, right? So you pour these concrete footers and your walls sit on those structures below grade. Now, when we're digging below that floor level, because your floor sits right above that footer in the basement. Mm-hmm. Now, when we have to lower that floor from 7 feet to 9 feet, now we're going to be going below that footer and compromising that dirt structure that's supporting that, which will then affect your walls, which will then affect your whole building could come down.
Yeah.
So if theoretically, if you go down and dig out your basement without doing it properly and underpinning, which just means supporting those footers,
something underneath
foundational support for the new space you just created.
Well,
Yeah.
not for the new space, for the existing.
Oh, okay.
Because you have to support what's there in order to go down. Then once you go down, then you have to put in new footers basically to support what's there.
Interesting. Yeah.
So it's a process, and it's very complicated and very costly.
and
Sounds
you have to
complicated and
pump
costly.
in the concrete. Like everything has to be calculated and done right.
Yeah. Otherwise, like Nick said, the whole house could come down.
Yeah, it could fall in on you.
I can't imagine people try to do this on their own. Do they? Is this a...
For that, probably not.
Listen, code exists for a reason, right? It's
Yeah.
been around for a long time. I don't hear about it too often, obviously, but I'm sure it's happened.
Yeah, yeah. If you are downtown though, and you have like a cellar situation, you can always get creative. Instead of doing something, you turn it into like a wine cellar. Didn't you guys do that with like Elsa or
Exactly.
Emma?
I
Yep.
remember that.
Yep. So you just have a wine cellar or something that's functional.
Yeah. So you still get some use out of it, but you're not necessarily going to all these lengths of underpinning and lowering the floor and all this other crazy
But
stuff.
from an investor standpoint, you're not adding that square footage as habitable space.
No.
So you're not getting that value either. Granted, a cool secret wine cellar is a great marketing situation, right? And people would love it. But is it adding value to the overall value of your home? Probably not so much, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So just depends, right? Your situation and what's going on.
Yeah.
So sometimes you're very limited with what you can do.
Yeah. And honestly, like in terms of basements, it's a lot more simpler than attic conversions, because in the attic conversion, there's how many points are there, Paul? I'm going to have you go through them, but you have to worry about all that load now that we're adding at the top that's going to now transfer down through the entire structure.
There's 4 pages of stuff.
Yeah.
There's a cheat sheet that the city puts out. And there's new things that have even come up recently, which we can talk about.
So if you are doing your basement and you don't have to underpin, you already have appropriate ceiling heights, that renovation is going to be much less expensive than a proper attic conversion. Again, depending on the circumstances of the attic as well. And now let's get into some of those points, Paul.
Yeah. Where do you want to start with the stairs?
Yeah, start wherever you want. We go through them all.
Well, yeah. The first thing is how you're getting up to the space, right? There's a certain height that's required.
6'8".
Yeah, and not only that, but a lot of times in these older homes, again, you have stairs that are very narrow, so you don't even have a 3 foot wide stairway. It might only be 2 feet wide.
It might be 34 inches and code is 36 inches, and you have to rebuild that staircase because once we change the attic to a habitable space, Now everything that's associated with that attic, the floor joists, the stairs, the ceiling heights, everything has to be updated properly to meet those codes.
Yeah, and stairs are a huge issue because a lot of times too, people aren't necessarily thinking about converting it in the future. So when they put these stairs in, it's almost like a freaking ladder that you're climbing up. You know, there's a certain riser height that you're allowed by code, and you can't go over that. So again, to Nick's point, everything has to comply. If it doesn't comply, you're going to have an issue converting that into a habitable space. So if the stairs need to be rebuilt, all of a sudden you might have to figure out, okay, if I can only go this much for my rise and this much for my run, now I'm going to have the stairs take up, 1.5 times more space because I need a longer run of stairs because I can't go up as high each step.
And if we're in an older home downtown and your bedrooms are always already on the smaller side, now we're stealing space from those small bedrooms to accommodate the staircase. So now we're like, okay, well, are we going to give that space to a bathroom and then lose that bedroom and then maybe do 2 bedrooms upstairs? Because we have to think about those things because you're probably going to be sacrificing some space on that second floor or that first floor in order to accommodate this stair change.
Yeah. And a lot of people will think, they get confused because your regular stairs between levels could be grandfathered in, where you don't have to change it. So you could have a staircase going from your first main level up to the second level that doesn't comply either. But if you don't touch it, you can leave that as it is, right? Because you already have bedrooms on the second level. You already have everything on your first level. That stair that goes between those can stay and be non-compliant. That's fine. The problem is that it's considered a change of use up there in the attic, and that change of use is what's triggering everything to comply.
Yeah, a lot of our clients are like, well, let's just get the stairs grandfathered in. And what do we tell them, Pa?
Yeah, it's not going to happen. It's not possible.
Because
that's basically
we're changing that space. We're changing the use from an attic storage area to a habitable space.
Can I ask a general question about attics? And it's going to sound pretty layman. So I see these cool walk-in attics where you can actually or it is a storage space that could be converted. But like our attic, I think it's like just a pull down. I've never even looked inside it. I don't even know how much space is up there. What's the difference in these types of attics, and what's like modern and popular, or like are most of these walk-in attics older spaces, or is there?
Mostly, yeah. Because does yours even have a ladder? Do you know?
I don't know. It just has I've never opened it up.
I know I'm
probably
in a newer,
does. Probably has a ladder.
Yeah, I know I'm in a newer home and there's no ladder, so it's just literally you can pop up there. It's like a little access panel. But I would have to put like a step ladder below it in order to climb up into the attic space.
I think for like 20 years or so, like the 90s and early 2000s, it was very popular to have a door that folds down and the ladder that folds out. And I think what's happening now with a lot of these new builds, even these $800,000 new builds, they have the minimum clearance, that opening.
Yep.
And they just put an access panel.
Yeah, it's like for maintenance only, or if you need to get up there to like wire something, some can lights or something.
But in your house, you have so much space and so much storage in the basement and all over the place.
Yeah.
You don't. It's not made. Your attic space is not made for storage.
Yeah.
Whereas it was common in the 90s and early 2000s to have actual storage use in your attic space. Not so much anymore. We're just like.
It depends. It also depends on how stuff is framed up. So if you're in a newer home, like within the last decade, your space up above is not designed for anything at all. It's just there. It's attic space. But yeah, if you have access where it's like you have a ladder that pulls down, normally it's like people actually framed up rafters and you have your ceiling joists that are all framed up. It's not a pre-manufactured truss that like comes off the assembly line. That's just like used up there.
Right.
And there's usually like some plywood or something.
They would have subfloors, some type of subfloors.
Yep. So that you can actually put something up there. Like if I were to go up into my attic space right now, it's just all trusses. And all these pre-engineered trusses just
like
have
every 24 inches
insulation.
So you'd have to walk through the spider web of trusses every 24 inches, which would be I don't know. That'd be cool. We should go up there.
There's probably spider webs too.
Oh no.
Yeah, not spider webs. But there's no subfloors or anything like that. Like there's no way. It's not easy to walk around in that space. It's not designed even really to be accessed by the homeowner.
Yeah. So what you're saying, Danny, is correct. A lot of these homes that have like a small staircase leading up to an attic space, it's when it was taboo to have actual to actually functionally use this as a storage space. And a lot of these floor joists are 2x6s. Now, to be fair, they're the old true 2x6s. And 120 years ago, 80 years ago, wood was a lot denser than what we're harvesting now for the sustainable wood.
Well, it's also dried out over all that time. So.
Sure. So it's a lot stronger, right? So your 2x6, your true 2x6 from 100 years ago is probably 2 to 3 times stronger than the pine that you're buying in Lowe's right now today. And whenever you submit to the city, they're going off those numbers. So even though your 2x6s might be okay to hold a couple humans in on that as a habitable space, they're not going to use those numbers. They're going to go by, this is what code's calling for now with current standards, based on you're buying these members at Lowe's today, or your lumber supply house. And essentially now you are required to beef up those members to meet code. So instead of having 2x6s, you might need 2x10s, which will also, and then you got to keep, now we're taking up additional space. So now we're raising that floor up a couple inches, which means if we're already at a limited height in that attic space, we're taking more space away from that. So now we have to have a conversation about putting in dormers or popping the top. Obviously, dormers are going to be less expensive than doing an entire whole new roof structure. But I like dormers too, because it gives a little bit more, it speaks to that era of architecture. We can keep it like, it's less boxy too. It gives it a little more character.
It's also more cost effective.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the next point I was going to get to. So once you deal with the stairs, as you then enter the attic space, the next thing is head clearance. Even entering into the attic space, a lot of times you'll need something like a dormer, because again, that 6 foot 8 inches is required at the stair at all times.
The one negative of that though is you're still going to see those 45-degree ceilings, and it's not going to feel like a true, normal floor where you're going to have, walls that go up 8.5 feet or 8 feet, and then a flat ceiling. You might have 9 feet in your peak, but in cathedral ceilings, but you're not going to necessarily have that near the wall. You might have a 4-foot knee wall, 5-foot knee wall, 3-foot knee wall, and we design around that typically.
Yeah, and the final point for the head clearance, though, like Nick said, the center might be at 9, 10, whatever, right? As long as 50% of your floor area that's up there has a ceiling height of not less than 7 feet, then basically you can convert it. So there's certain calculation that we have to show when we're drawing this up, because you have to show that with the 5 foot level there's a certain percentage, and then the 7 foot level there's a certain percentage, and for ceilings that are under 5 feet, it's not permittable. You don't count that at all towards your habitable space.
Right. The one thing too is like, so if we do have 3-foot knee walls,
yeah, so you can have a 3-foot knee wall,
but
that space doesn't count.
Yeah, we're only counting the square footage where there's a ceiling height of 5 feet or greater.
Yeah.
So I still think it makes it feel bigger, or you can do built-ins, you can do whatever you'd like. I don't enclose a space to 5 as a standard. We think about it a little bit and go from there.
Yeah. Personally, I think like 4 is acceptable, right? A 4-foot knee wall. But I mean, yeah, you can go down to 3. So obviously I would never recommend going all the way down to where it you have your rafters basically dying into the top of the wall.
Well, no, actually I don't think you
I've
can.
seen that.
No, I think the electrical code now calls for...
Oh, if you have outlets in them?
Yeah. Unless you're going to do floor rated outlets, you have to have a knee wall height, the minimum of, I think it's 3 feet actually. I have to look that up. What else we got, Paul?
So then once you get up there, so we talked about all the ceiling height stuff. The floor is the next main issue, which you touched on a little bit. So usually it's ceiling joists, right? And it's designed for storage, not designed for somebody to be up there. There are certain loads that you have to calculate and determine for your live loading and your dead loading. Dead loading is just the weight of all the materials. So you have to factor that in. And then anything that...
And that includes anything you're bringing up there, like drywall, tile, tubs, if we're adding a bathroom.
And then your live load is people and other activity taking place in the space. So those two numbers basically you combine and have to calculate and determine based on the length of the span, where it's being supported, right? Is that member adequate to support that load or not? And almost, 9 times out of 10, it's almost like 10 times out of 10. Pretty much every single time you need to do something with your floor joists.
Yeah, I mean, I would say last year, certainly a few years back, they didn't, even though it was code, because all these standards are based on the International Building Code, the IBC, and every state adopts it and puts it into their own code as a standard, but they don't always enforce it. So sometimes they can give permit approval without necessarily demanding that you do this, this, and this. And that's happened. It's happened in the past, and especially in smaller municipalities where they want to make sure they're checking the big picture items. They don't necessarily, address ceiling height. They just make sure that you have your floor joists and that everything can be supported. They have the egress window. They want to make sure safety is addressed first. And now, certainly in Columbus, they are enforcing everything, which I think is a great thing, because if you're gonna do an attic conversion in your home, you want it to function properly. And some people, particularly investors, may want to cut corners to get that value, pull that value out of it, but not necessarily make it as functional as it could or should be.
Yeah. So things that we'll put into the plans typically for the flooring, to bounce back to that, we need to show the sizing, we need to show the spacing, we need to show the direction, where everything's being supported. And usually what we end up doing is, we used to say sistering all the time until somebody corrected us.
Well,
So
it was for years.
Well,
and now they're like, it's bracing.
yeah,
You have to call it bracing. Relabel that.
getting into the weeds of it. Sistering, it's like if it's damaged, right? Then you're it's still putting something right next to what's there.
But only the damaged portion.
Right. So that's sistering. But bracing, it's like a whole new member that goes in, again, right next to the one that's there, but it's a new member that's taking on extra load.
Yeah, from one load bearing point to the other, like all the way across. And then it's bolted together with structural screws or nails.
Yeah. And a lot of times, if you want to try to keep the same space from the bottom of the ceiling below to the top of the floor above in the attic space, you'll have to usually use like an LVL member. So an engineered member. You can't just go to Lowe's and buy a 2x whatever and throw it in there most times.
And honestly, I love that because, again, Denny, I was mentioning to you, like, if code is calling for 2x10s and we only have 2x6s, that means that we have to tear out the whole entire ceiling of my second floor and the floor of the third floor and reframe everything.
And then that ceiling is going to be lower.
And that ceiling's going to be lower, which is not cool. We want the most space possible, right? So to get around that, we can actually brace those existing 2x6s with LVLs that are only 2x6s, that are 2x6s themselves. They have the structural load to take on the requirements. The thing is, you'll need a cut sheet or a letter from an engineer in addition to your architectural drawings to qualify that. I always prefer that route because now we're not demoing this floor. We don't have to touch the second floor space. We're not impacting that area, especially if we weren't planning on doing it in the first place. If this was going to be a full gut, then we'll have that conversation. But if we're like, hey, I just want to do an attic conversion on my home and add square footage and try to like not disrupt my family and the function of the household as much as possible. Okay, great. We're going to brace every single joist with an LVL that's up there. It's going to also give it a lot more stability.
Yeah, it depends too, because sometimes it'll be like we go into an investment property that's a full gut, right? So there's nothing there anyway. It's like you might as well just do whatever at that point.
And I would say it's kind of a wash because the LVLs are going to be more expensive than your dimensional lumber, like your 2x12s, but you're not demoing and reframing an entire floor. Bracing a floor is much easier than reframing everything, in my opinion.
Yeah. I guess I would tend to agree. The next thing would then be electrical and mechanical plumbing. So plumbing is kind of easy. It's like whatever you need to show, you show, and then you just connect back where you need to connect.
Which is the exception of the toilet because you can't go through your joist. You have to go underneath, which may create some soffits downstairs.
And depending on how your joists are running, right? If you can run your lines through the same direction as your joist, then you might get away with not
that would
doing
be great.
a soffit.
That's ideal.
Yeah.
And we plan our bathroom design around that a lot.
Mechanical, you just need to make sure that your system can handle supplying air up there, right? If you have to add a chase somewhere down below, you add a chase. Otherwise, you just need supplying return up in the space. You need to show where that's coming up through and what your CFM rating is for that space based on how big the space is. And then the last thing is electrical. A lot of the older homes will be like a 100 amp panel, which really by modern standards, you're kind of at the limit with a 100 amp panel. And if you're redoing the whole house, you're probably putting in a dishwasher and all these other modern amenities that, 100 years ago, nobody had those things.
Sure.
So again, the demand is probably, if you're adding then space or adding an addition, you're probably going to want to upgrade your panel with any electrical stuff that you're doing.
I would encourage that on almost every renovation, just because.
I know every now and then we run into the oddball that's like, no, I want the 100 amp still.
It's like, no, we should upgrade the service regardless, especially if we're adding square footage.
Yeah.
I mean, and then you got to check your furnace. I mean, can your furnace and your AC accommodate that additional square footage also? A lot of times we're like, do we do a split unit? This way it can be its own zone. But that's very costly. But if you already have a furnace that's old, like kind of like 15, 20 years old, and you're like, hey, we need to replace this anyways. Let's get a larger new furnace, because we're gonna have to buy a new one anyways. And that will accommodate that additional square footage.
Yeah. And then the last thing that's on the list is egress requirements. And when you're talking about life safety, you're also talking about smoke detection, carbon monoxide. So each level you have to have a combo CO2 and smoke detector.
At least one combo.
Yeah. And then if you're in a bedroom space, you have to have a smoke detector. Now, if it's an attic space, you just need the one combo that would serve as both things, right? Because if you're in the sleeping area already on the attic level, then you would just have that one combo and be.
If you have a big attic space and you're trying to get 2 bedrooms out of it, well,
then you would need a smoke detector in each, plus then a combo somewhere like maybe right at the top of the stairs.
I would say in a lot of these older homes, we don't necessarily have that much space. So it's usually just a second primary suite. And I say second primary suite because we don't ever want to have the sole primary suite on the 3rd floor. We've done a lot of deals and we've seen it just not pay off the way we were hoping it would. Most homeowners want to see either on the 1st floor or the 2nd floor. Again, we can have another one on the 3rd floor. That's fine. But we don't want that to be the true primary suite and the only primary suite in the residence.
Yeah. And then final egress thing is windows. Usually up in your attic space, you have a tiny little window, maybe in a dormer, and that's it. That's all that you have. So again, if you're already putting a dormer in at your stair location, then you're probably going to have to put in a dormer and or enlarge the window that's in an existing dormer, because you have to have a 5.7 square foot area to get out. There's certain dimensions that it has to be, a certain height off the floor. So all of those things have to be met and comply with the current code as well.
And this is basically a space that's big enough for a firefighter to crawl in and out of that space with full gear. That's why we have our minimum thresholds. Although I will say most of the time we're able to just do like a casement style window. So if it is like either like a picture frame window that doesn't open, or if it's a double hung window that doesn't open to 5.7 clearance, then we can just replace that with a casement window that completely opens to hopefully meet that. Obviously, if it still doesn't meet those standards, then you're going to have to do some reframing.
Yeah, because if you have a double hung, you're talking about at least a 4-foot height by around a 3-foot width.
Which is a huge window for an attic space, which you typically don't see unless you have like some type of dormer.
Casement, you can get down to like 41 inches by 20 inches wide.
Yeah.
So it's a lot narrower and, skinnier.
And quite frankly, if we have an existing window in the attic space, it's usually proportioned on the smaller side. And I don't know that I'd want to necessarily enlarge it. I like keeping the archetype of the house so that the character's maintained.
But there has to be an egress in order to call it a bedroom. Is that
absolutely?
That is correct.
Yeah.
So if we're thinking like, hey, we built this great office off the kids' playroom in the basement, and it's got a bathroom, and it could be a bedroom, it would need to have an escape of some kind.
When you say could be, if you want to count it as a bedroom, then yes, you absolutely would need egress. You would need to put. So if you're in your basement, you would have to have egress window going out, whatever. If it's an office, no. So that's the thing. It's like,
so if you have a 3-bed, 2.5 bath, and you add a bathroom in the basement, now you have a 3-bed, 3.5 bath, and then we have this room in the basement that doesn't have an egress, it won't be a 4. It won't be a 4-bedroom house. So when you sell it, you can't say it's a 4-bedroom.
Egress is always the number one thing when you're talking about an area where people are sleeping.
Yep.
So that's also why the smoke detector has to be in every sleeping area as well.
And an egress window, they start around $3,500, and that's installed, and that's today. Prices are going up like crazy. Nicer windows are obviously more expensive. You can spend $6,000 or $7,000. You can do a full walkout if you really want to. You don't need to, but anyways, that $3,500 investment though, if that gives you a 4th bedroom to your house when you're selling it, what does that do for your house value in those numbers?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Is that significant? Is it worth the cost of?
I think it's going to add a lot more than $3,500.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is why we always have these conversations about converting attics, converting basements, especially when you get the older stock home where it's like these spaces are there and they'll have like a dedicated stair going up that might be able to be utilized. Like Nick said, maybe you have to put in X amount, but the amount you're putting in versus what you're getting out is always higher on the back end.
But Danny, if you were to call me and say, "Hey Nick, I want a design consultation. I want to talk about attic conversions or basement, finishing my basement," and I show up to the suburbs and I see this massive yard, you're like, a 1/3 acre lot, and this on the smaller, and your house is on the smaller side, and I'm just like, Danny, we're not doing an attic conversion or finishing your basement. We're going to add an addition to your house. We're going to build onto the back of your house, extend your kitchen, your dining, add a mudroom, all these different things. We're just going to do a straight up addition because that's going to add the most value and functionality really for you and your family, not just the resale, but everything in all respects. Because for you, it wouldn't make sense. For you, finishing the basement was super simple, and that's why you did it. And it did add value, but honestly, it didn't add tremendous value. It probably add 30,000 on the high side, right? Even though it only cost you a few grand. I think that's a home run. That's great. And it's a great place for the kids to play. But if you're really like saying, hey, I need an office for myself. I need an office for my wife. We're having a 3rd child. We need another bedroom.
Yep.
Now I'm not putting that kid in the basement. I'm building an addition for you, and we're going to add that to the main level, right? So we'll have a different conversation. And I think that's why it's important just to talk to a design professional before, so you know what you're getting into.
And there's thresholds to everything. So it might be easier and more convenient to do certain things with the space that you have. But again, like Nick said, once you get to a certain point, and if you have the space to work with, the addition is going to make a lot more sense at that point versus trying to do whatever in the basement or do something up in your attic space.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would agree. If you're on the fence about stuff, on the fence again, it's like call somebody out, right? Call one of us out, have a conversation, and then it's like you go from there.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of times these older homes in the downtown area, you're on small, tiny lots. I mean, you're talking, sometimes it's like 30 foot wide, for the frontage. I mean, like incredibly small lots, maybe very deep, but very narrow. And, you're limited with what you can do and how much you can add to a house like that. So then your attic and your basement become much more critical. What can I do there?
They may be your only options. And then the question is, which is the best option for that particular investment? Which is actually appropriate because we're talking to your dad, Mr. P, about buying an investment property in German Village here in Columbus. So I can tell you right now, with the commission in German Village, you're very limited on what you can do. And they have a lot to say about what you do to your property. So those types of conversations are going to be crucial to adding square footage value and functionality for attic conversion and basements.
Yeah, because you can't touch anything on the exterior without going through that commission and jumping through a lot of red tape and a lot of hoops.
And you're going to need a variance because all the setbacks are already undersized and not meeting current code.
Yeah.
Well, I should say we're in Northeast Ohio, so it's probably different from downtown Columbus or.
Sure.
But the extension like that my parents put on their home, that was a good decision on their end in order increasing value. And,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that sunroom on the back of your parents' house added more value than finishing the basement. And the basement's huge, and the sunroom's actually smaller, but I think the value of that main floor square footage
Yeah.
exceeds what you're gaining in the basement.
Yep, that's right off the main living room, right off the kitchen. Again, it's, I mean, like,
Great for entertainment.
Yeah,
It was
great for entertainment.
Home run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it always depends on the situation and what's going on. So, I will mention too, we did recently an attic conversion for another property here in Columbus. We've done, God, I can't even count how many.
Hundreds.
Yeah. But new requirement that the city has just kicked into place.
The third party inspection.
Just whoever it is that's coming out, I forget the three initials, like MPK or something like that, or MPI.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, basically somebody needs to come and verify what's there. So even if we as architects come out, draw everything up, measure everything out, and document everything, the city now is to the point where, great, we don't believe you, we're going to send somebody out to look at it.
And
to check to see what's there.
And the way they're spinning this is when you submit for permit approval with drawings, they're now saying, okay, great. We're gonna review this. Everything looks good, but we're at a stopping point. We cannot approve this permit until our third party representative goes to your house, goes into your attic, takes pictures, and confirms that the conditions that you're showing as existing are correct. And then we go from there. And then they can finish their review and give the proper approval. Then you can get your permit and start construction.
Yeah. I think they're concerned about the life safety aspect of it, because that space was never intended to have people up there occupying it, sleeping there, and using the space. It was always intended to be storage for boxes.
I also think we're just with all this redevelopment and the new zoning code that's coming in, which we're going to have another episode on.
Yeah, we'll have an episode on that.
But now now you're in a 2-story home with an attic on a main corridor in Columbus, Ohio, and now all of a sudden this is zoned for 6 stories or 4 stories, right? Which instantly makes that property more valuable if it's realized, right? So rather than doing an attic conversion, we're going to have maybe some builders or developers with deeper pockets who are now saying, hey, we're going to buy this house, we're going to demo this house, and we're going to build a larger superstructure, right? That's going to be a multifamily, and go that route.
So you have done hundreds of attics, you said.
Yes.
Yeah.
What are some of the more like standout projects? Like what's a more interesting project? If you've done hundreds, I think, like what are ones that like stand out to you?
So a lot of these attics are small, right?
Yeah.
So we'll go up to an attic and I'll have a client be like, okay, we want to put, so we call it a party wall. Basically whenever you have like sometimes we're dealing a lot with duplexes and they're trying to make their investment more valuable, right? So they want to add that third level. But we have to have this firewall that goes all the way up and separate both units.
Yeah.
And once you cut that attic in half, you're literally in a space that's just basically a large closet.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. If you have your gable, so it's basically a triangular space, and your wall comes right up in the middle and meets the middle of that gable, right? You have half of a triangle.
Right.
You know.
So what we've doing is we're dedicating that whole attic space to one side of the duplex, calling it an owner's suite. And now it becomes a very functional space for that person. And then you have to fire rate the floor of the second unit. So the second unit stays as is. And we make this one side basically an owner's suite that's much bigger.
Interesting. That is interesting. Yeah.
And that actually adds a tremendous amount of value. And it's really good for house hacking because maybe somebody's, a young investor, a new investor wants to get in. Instead of getting a single family home, they want to get their feet wet and get into a multifamily. Well, now they're getting into a multifamily with an owner's suite. So they have that space to kind of still be comfortable and still have that rental unit that's attached to it. And it works out in terms of cash flow very well.
Yeah. I think the other interesting ones that stand out to me, it's anytime you get into major renovation work. Like if you're, like Nick said, if you're popping the top, you're completely removing the entire roof to basically raise everything up.
And there's some additional, once you pop the top, there's additional code that's required. Like we have to make sure we're showing more details and doing a few more things. So honestly, we try to avoid it because the design cost is a little bit higher, but more importantly, the construction cost is going to be higher.
Because you're turning an attic into another floor, essentially, right?
Exactly. A completely finished floor.
Yeah. So, I mean, it just depends. But the ones where it's more extensive work are usually a little bit more interesting to work on. So
we have, I got a great spray foam guy now because of all the attic conversions that we do. And I refer a lot of business, but, a lot of times you want to have these vaulted ceilings, right? When you have these, when you do the dormers and you have these 45-degree ceilings, right? You're going to want to like, well, I want as much space as possible. So we're going to vault these all the way up. And maybe we go up to 10 feet.
You kind of have to, because normally your floor, your ceiling joists and your floor, that's where your installation would be. And now that you're occupying that space, there would be nothing. It would just be framing that's up there. So now all that has to be insulated and
so that
protected.
insulation that was originally on the second floor ceiling, sitting on that attic space, is removed. And now we spray foam all the joists of the roof itself to insulate your house.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it. So we went through the whole list of things for your attic conversions.
Danny, wasn't that really exciting?
It was exciting. I mean, I'm learning about attic conversions.
And I didn't give you the credit that you deserve at the beginning of the podcast. You're part of our team. You help us post these. You help us produce these, and we had you on one podcast already.
The AI podcast.
Yeah.
It was episode 4.
You were remote for that one.
Calling in.
Yeah, but we need to get you here in person more often.
Well, I can ask more of these kind of like very, very elementary questions. I think I'm good at that.
That's okay.
Yeah,
those are easier to answer.
Well, and to Nick's point too, I don't think you'll ever be doing an attic conversion, but you might be doing stuff in your basement.
Definitely,
right?
Definitely.
Well, he might be at his new investment property with his father.
True.
That
Although
would
I would say get somewhere very close to German Village, but just outside of it.
Yeah, I really
The commissions are painful to go through.
No, Marion Village is a great area, but if your strategy is short-term rental, then I want to be in German Village.
Yeah, because just get something that you don't have to do much to, or that there's potential within it where you don't have to touch the outside. Because if you touch the outside, you're going through all the process,
the hoops.
Yeah,
which we may have to find out firsthand.
Yeah. So,
well, more episodes on that.
that would be great, actually. Yeah, that'd be great.
Follow the process.
All right, well, I think that wraps up all the exciting things to talk about for attic conversions and basements. At what life did I ever think that I'd be having a podcast on attics and basements? I don't know, but it happened. It happened, and it's real. But with that, we're gonna stop.
Webs. I was gonna say, don't forget spider webs.
Oh yeah, we gotta show that video. It's hysterical. All right, guys.
All right.
Well, we will see you on the next one in 2 weeks. Have a great day.
This has been the Arcfluence podcast. As always, you can get more information and additional content on arcfluence.com. Please subscribe on the platform of your choice and leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you.